What's up, guys? Random sweaty dumbass here. I saw this video about parrying yesterday with an absolutely astounding amount of upvotes and awards, and I wanted to make some corrections because the info being presented is anywhere from somewhat wrong to completely wrong. I'm sure Yoratsubasa is trying to be helpful, but his experimentation is pretty much entirely vibes based and not based on any real data. And while I don't have any info on enemy parry tables or whatever, I do at least have info on parry tool timings we can work with. Muting the absolutely insane music choice here really quick, I want to first point out that we're starting with an iron round shield in Dark Souls 3, which we will then later compare to a medium shield equipped with Carry and Retaliation in Elden Ring. This is a big problem if we're going to compare parry timings across different games because these two shields have two very different timings. As you can see, small shields like the iron round shield in Dark Souls 3 have a parry window of 10 frames starting on the 11th frame of the animation. Any shield in Elden Ring with Carry and Retaliation, however, has 13 parry frames starting on frame 9, so it starts earlier and lasts longer. Already, we really shouldn't be comparing these two shields, since they're not really in the same class. The numbers are different, so of course it's going to feel different. But let's get to the meat of the video here. Yoru asserts that parrying has, quote, two major deviations in the move from DS3 to ER. Number one, parries in DS3 are, quote unquote, later, and number two, you can parry from farther away in Dark Souls 3 than in Elden Ring. In regards to the first point, we're showing Gundyr. This is a problem because I would say Gundyr is not typical of a DS3 encounter, not just because he's a boss, but because he's known among DS3 players as one of the easiest enemies to parry in the game. And then we're comparing him to the Bell-Bearing Hunter in Elden Ring. So this is a really weird comparison to me because these enemies are vastly different from each other and have different movesets and different weapons. A better way to do this would be to show two similar enemies from each game. So first, let's check out Knights with Spears. Now these two enemies are not exactly the same, of course, but they're a lot closer than Gundyr and the Bell Bitch. Also notice that I'm using a buckler in Elden Ring and the target shield in DS3, which are pretty much the same and have very similar windows, as you can see here. So check out the timing on this parry. Now check this one out. Which would you say had the, quote, later parry timing? I think it should be fairly obvious.
This dirty dog was pretty much at the top of the stairs when I started my parry, if you didn't catch that.
So later, earlier, it really depends. I will say, on this point, DS3 seems to be more lenient with partial parries, as they'll occasionally still give you the parry even if you take the partial parry damage. I only have my anecdotal experience here, but in 300 hours of Elden Ring play, I have never seen this happen. So I suppose in this regard, parrying could be considered easier in Dark Souls 3. Now, number two is fairly easy to disprove because it's just completely wrong. Gundyr has an extremely long weapon, so of course you can parry him from distance, but this is still the case in ER. This Godric Knight with the spear can be parried at max range on the poke and the swing, as you can see. And here you can admire my Confessor's crop top while I parry Banished Knight halberd attacks from max distance. In fact, I would contend that parrying these types of attacks from distance is much easier in Elden Ring since they have longer wind-up animations as compared to similar attacks from similar enemies in Dark Souls 3. Good luck reaction parrying this, for example, or this from max distance. I'd also like to point out that the Banished Knight's halberd attack here hit the ground below me, kind of like Gundyr. Basically, your parry needs to come in contact with the enemy's hitboxes while your parry frames are active. Sometimes that might need to be sooner, or sometimes it might need to be later, depending on positioning and timing. It just comes down to learning the attacks. You don't need to be faster, you don't need to be closer. That all depends on the enemy's attack and the tool you're using to parry. For what it's worth, though, getting as close as you can makes parrying in both games much, much easier. My general rule of thumb is watch the wrist, which I'm sure many of you have heard before. This is because the wrist is the fulcrum of the attack, which means it will be where the arc of the swing is the slowest, giving you the most time to react. All in all, it takes time to learn to parry in both DS3 and ER because you need to get a feel for enemies' attacks and your parry tool of choice. I distinctly remember feeling that parrying was harder in Dark Souls 3 coming from the older games, and also felt that way about Elden Ring until I got used to the differences. Chances are you're misremembering how good you were at parrying in Dark Souls 3 because our lizard brains like to remember our moments of peak performance as our average performance, which is not the case. I'd also like to point out how hard it is to react to some of these attacks in Dark Souls 3. But all in all, there are much more parrying options with much longer windows in Elden Ring than I believe any other FromSoft game. So you've got a lot more options here to explore than ever before. So I hope this was helpful, and have fun parrying out there.